Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for joining us. Well, we're going to talk with the chairperson of the House Appropriations Committee, Representative Jordan Harris. And obviously, when you talk about appropriations, you talk about money. It's our money, our tax dollars. How will it be spent? But first, a couple of reporters joined me to talk about important proposals in the state legislature dealing with the April 23rd primary election. I should add all elections in the state. We'll get to that and more after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, well, let's get to the important topics. Joining me are two reporters who are regular guests on the program. Marc Levy, he's with the Associated Press, and Angela Couloumbis, she's with Spotlight PA. All right, Angela, I'm going to talk about, going to go to you first. I'll tell you, there's a series of proposals that would bring about, can I use the word big or significant words, I should say, changes to how we vote. Is that correct?
Yes, in short. So it is, as you mentioned, almost primary season, and there are kind of a rash of election-related bills that are being introduced and are in various phases of consideration in the legislature. I think one of the bigger ones would usher in things like early voting, which Pennsylvania does not have, the ability to go to a polling station up to 2 weeks before an election.
So a polling station would have to have individuals in there working so people could come in to vote. Is that correct?
Well, they would actually have to go to the county elections office to cast that vote. And but it would be a significant change from where we are today. Yeah. We do have mail ballots and vote by mail, but those are obviously processed the day of the election, and that's when they're opened and counted. So there's that piece. There's also a piece that has to do with how elections are funded, campaign finance piece, which we can get into at another point. And there's also another piece of legislation from the Republican side, significantly, that would ban drop boxes and ban satellite offices.
Yeah, Marc, take it.
Yeah, look, we're starting to see the sides, Republicans, Democrats, stake out their territory on election legislation. This is a notorious area of partisan disagreement. A lot of election bills and improvements to elections and modernization have been stuck in partisan disputes over the last 4 years. And these bills quite possibly will meet the same fate. They, even if they pass, they won't pass anytime soon. They won't affect the April 23rd primary.
Yeah.
But there is some intention of trying to make changes before the November presidential election in Pennsylvania, when Pennsylvania will be one of the most, if not the most important state in the nation.
One of a handful, exactly.
Of swing states and battlegrounds for Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But you know, there are also lawsuits in courts that are fighting it out over voting rules and how people can vote in Pennsylvania.
Talk about the drop boxes.
Well, so, you know, there's no consistency across the state with drop boxes. Some counties have them, some don't.
What are they, first of all?
They're basically, they're like mailboxes where you can drop your own ballot. And in Pennsylvania, under state law, you can only drop your own ballot. You're not allowed to drop other people's ballots. And there are many, many conspiracy theories about supposedly ballot stuffing and stuffing drop boxes with ballots.
But in a family, would it be uncommon for the spouse to take the, their significant other's vote and drop it in the mailbox?
No, and in fact, there was a very high-profile example of that with former Governor Tom Wolf, who had gone on a radio show, I believe, and said that his wife had dropped his ballot, and that became, there was a lot of brouhaha over that.
That's correct. Yeah, I remember that.
Right, but I think it's important to point out that there is zero proof that drop boxes are somehow a vector of voting fraud.
Right.
There is zero proof that mail-in voting is somehow a vector of voting fraud. There just is no proof of that, of any sort of widespread fraud that would affect the outcome of an election involving mail-in voting, involving drop boxes. But Republicans have sought to ban drop boxes, and what we have seen in past elections is more of the liberal-leaning counties using them to serve their citizens.
And that's one of the reasons it's become partisan.
It's become partisan primarily because Donald Trump in 2020 started demonizing mail-in voting as rife with fraud, and all those allegations are baseless. There has been no prosecutor, no judge, no election board in Pennsylvania or anywhere else for that matter that has found any sort of significant voting fraud that would have changed the outcome of an election. All
right, we're going to vote on April 23rd. We'll continue with this discussion and take up another one after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities.
Right, where is that? Is that being heard in the Third Circuit right now?
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, my guests are Marc Levy with the Associated Press and Angela Couloumbis with Spotlight PA. We're talking about very, very important aspects of the voting that we do. The next time we will do is on the primary on April 23rd. All right, Angela, let's talk about these. You mail in voting, you put the actual ballot inside a smaller envelope, and then you have an outer envelope, and you must sign and date the outer envelope. And if you don't do that properly, what happens?
Well, that's under litigation at the moment. But yes, correct. There is a secrecy envelope in which you place your ballot, and then there is an outer envelope that you have to date and sign. And there's been a lot of confusion around the dating and the signing. Some people, for instance, will put an incorrect date, or they will put their birth date. And there's been a lot of court cases in the past, but surrounding how counties should deal with that. A lot of counties do something called curing, so that they will call the voter if they spot a mistake ahead of time and have them come in and correct it. But right now, there is a big federal lawsuit. It was brought by various voting rights groups, and it's in federal court, federal appeals court, that would basically force counties to, or require counties to count ballots that are timely received but have an insignificant paperwork error, such as a misdated or undated ballot.
All right, campaign finance reform. Right now, if I correct, you can give almost any amount of money at any time. Is that correct?
Right. Pennsylvania is what's been called sort of the Wild West of campaign finance.
Well, I like that, the Wild West.
A lot of states have limits on how much you can give, an individual can give, or how much a candidate can receive. But in Pennsylvania, you can give in any amount. The only thing that's banned is essentially money from corporations. Corporations can't give money, but partnerships, people, wealthy people can give $1 million if they want to a candidate for state office. There is a proposal, though, that has emerged in the state house, sponsored by Democrats, that would essentially require dark money groups to disclose their donors, to file reports with the state. And these are groups that, under federal law, are organized as a nonprofit and don't have to disclose their donors as a nonprofit. But what Democrats in the state house are hoping to do is to require them to disclose their donors as soon as they start giving money or spending money politically in the state, which is happening in increasing amounts.
Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is election reform is not an easy thing to pass in the state legislature with oftentimes big differences between Democrats and Republicans.
Absolutely, and I think some of the measures that we've discussed here today and in the past have been caught up because of that partisan divide, and Republicans feel very strongly that any election reform measure should include things that they consider very important, including a voter ID requirement in order to vote. And there is so much disagreement that it results in paralysis.
Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is that it's also very close to the primary, a month away. I mean, you know, passing legislation now, well, of course, it would have to go to Governor Shapiro for his signature or his veto, is very difficult to accomplish.
Right. We've seen in the past that lawmakers, governors, courts as well are very sensitive about making changes to election processes and voting in the run-up to an election. So presumably there will be no changes to how we vote to election laws ahead of that would affect the April 23rd primary. But the November presidential election is still in play. I think there are bills, there are proposals, there are lawsuits that in theory could affect something that we do in that election.
Well, look, I want to thank both of you for coming in. This was a very, very important update. All right, coming up, we have the chairperson of the House Appropriations Committee, Representative Jordan Harris, and we couldn't have the Appropriations Chair and not talk about money, the budget, our money. Remember, it's our tax dollars that fund the state. We'll get to that soon.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Welcome back. Well, now my guest is Representative Jordan Harris. He's a Democrat who represents the 186th District in the city of Philadelphia. He is the Appropriations Chair. And you don't have the Appropriations Chair on a program and not talk about money. In this case, we're going to talk about the budget. Hello there, Representative.
Good, always good to be with you, Doc. Good to see you.
It's my pleasure. Well, first of all, let's talk about the state budget, the priorities in that budget. Of course, the budget proposal comes to the legislature from Governor Shapiro, who obviously has the big responsibility of presenting his budget proposal to the legislature.
Well, you know, we have a responsibility in our budget. I believe budgets are moral documents. And quite honestly, I think this budget gets to the heart of things that are important to people all across Pennsylvania. We have a Commonwealth Court ruling that says how we fund public education is unconstitutional. So one of the first and main priorities for us in this budget cycle is fixing that problem. In the governor's budget proposal, we have a $1.1 billion investment in public education. $900 million of that will go to what we're calling adequacy funding, which is basically to right the wrongs of our past with regards to how we fund public education, and driving those resources directly to the districts that have been underfunded, and then $200 million going through the basic education funding formula. All of this was derived because of the court ruling, and then the pathway was set forward by the Basic Education Funding Commission that wrapped up this work a few months ago. So for us in our caucus, moving forward with education funding and basically abiding by the court's ruling is one of our main priorities with regards to this year's budget.
Yeah, and as you point out, as I read the budget, there is a good bit of it into education, which obviously is significant, both short-term and long-term, for not just the individuals, but for the economic health of the state.
Well, I mean, think about it this way. Businesses move to places where they have an educated workforce to do the work that's necessary. So if we want to make Pennsylvania a great place to live, to work, to raise a family, a big part of that is making sure that we have an educated workforce. So basic education funding is extremely important, but also one of the other things that the governor talked about is how we look at our community college system and our state system, and how we put those systems together and get more people credentialed. When we can have a pipeline of folks who are credentialed to do a myriad of things throughout the Commonwealth, then you can, go out to businesses and say, we would love for you to move your headquarters here or bring work here. Businesses won't come if the workforce isn't here. And we know that, and that's why that's also a big part of the governor's budget.
Well, look, let's run to a break. When we come back, I want you to talk about the challenges and the solutions to some of the problems. Obviously, the one aspect of the governor's budget that got a lot of praise was it didn't raise taxes, and it leaves the state, he says, with a surplus. Now, not everybody in your chamber agrees that it won't cause taxes to be raised, and we'll get to that and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania American Water. We keep life flowing across the Keystone State.
All right, my guest is Representative Jordan Harris. He chairs the House Appropriation Committee, and we're talking about a number of subjects related to the budget, but obviously it's, taxpayer dollars that are heavily involved in what goes on in the state legislature. All right, Representative, we were talking about the state budget proposal by Governor Shapiro, and there are some challenges to the budget proposal. Let's talk about them.
I mean, some challenges. I mean, there's some, I don't consider them controversial, but we talk about the legalization of adult use cannabis. That's in the governor's budget. So some would call that controversial. Some have talked about the amount of investments that we're making financially. Some people say that we can't afford it. The truth is this: we have several $billions in a rainy day fund. If we were to enact the governor's budget as is, we would still have about $11 billion in a surplus, and we would still be able to put a little over $1 billion in addition to the rainy day fund. So Pennsylvania is in a good financial footing this year and for a few years, and we should be making, in my opinion, the investments today that we know will grow our economy. Now, there's we like to call it a humble majority in the House. We have a one-seat majority. The Republicans still control the Senate, and then you have a Democratic governor. So, divided government is all about, give and take and building consensus. So that's definitely something that's going to happen for us to get a budget done.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Talking about a subject that lots of folks ask me about, and that's the legalization of marijuana. It does have a sense of support by the voters of the state, but that seems to not, and states around us have done it, but it doesn't look like that's going to pass the legislature.
Well, listen, we have a lot of rural places in Pennsylvania and a lot of farmland in Pennsylvania. And for the life of me, I just don't understand why some of my colleagues don't see the value and what an industry like adult use cannabis could do for Pennsylvania. We already have a medical program here in Pennsylvania, but when you look at many of the states around us, they've already legalized adult use cannabis, and they're reaping the financial benefits from it, whereas we're still locking people up for something that we now sell medicinally in Pennsylvania. I believe that we're on the wrong side of history on this particular topic. The governor agrees. I think the voters agree. I think it's just time for the legislature to actually do it, legalize it.
Yeah.
We can regulate it. We can tax it. And we can have a brand new industry right here in the Commonwealth that's going to benefit many of our rural areas and a lot of our farmers in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like it's going to pass the legislature.
Well, look, there are some folks who are not there yet, but I think if you asked a lot of the rank and file members, I think you'd actually have the votes to get it done.
Oh, really? Okay.
As far as the ranking file members, I would say yes. You would have enough votes to get it done. Now, whether leadership in some chambers will allow that to happen, I'm not necessarily positive as of right now. But the bottom line is, it's an industry that is flourishing all around us, and we're missing out on a lot of revenue, in my mind, that could be coming to the Commonwealth.
All right, before I let you go, I want to go to another subject, the clean slate law. What is the clean slate law, and why is it important?
Well, anybody that knows me knows that my passion has been criminal justice reform since being in the legislature. In this past December, we expanded what we've done in the clean slate and record sealing space here in Pennsylvania. We started off back in 2018, myself and my colleague, Representative Delosier, and we got clean slate done. It only dealt with low-level misdemeanors. A lot of people didn't think we could get felonies done then, but what we did at the end of last year is we updated the clean slate law, which we call Clean Slate 3.0, to include nonviolent felonies. Clean slate simply says this: after a certain amount of time, and it depends on whether it's a felony or misdemeanor, a person who has been free from arrest and basically who has proven themselves worthy of a second chance, they can now get that second chance. So for us, when we talk about workforce, when we talk about workforce development, when we talk about the future of the Commonwealth, it has to include our brothers and sisters who may have found themselves on the wrong side of the law, but who've changed their lives around.
Where does that stand now? Where does that stand now?
It was signed by the Clean Slate 3.0 was signed by the governor and takes effect quite soon here with regards to the felony inclusion, the nonviolent felony inclusion. And we're coming up on an anniversary up in June. So we're getting ready to celebrate the more than 40 million criminal records that have been sealed in Pennsylvania.
As you get around the state, that has lots of support.
Tons of support. Lots of people believe in second chances.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt about that, and my general sense is it's popular. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on the program, and you're always welcome, and we'll see you soon.